Welcome to the Stars Aligned Dramas and Dreams podcast, where the infinite sky meets the starry world of dramas. We're your guides through the cosmos, from heart-stopping queer love stories to straight dramas of unexpected love.
And every unforgettable moment in between that make us swoon, laugh, and cry. And, of course, we'll sprinkle in a little stardust along the way.
I'm Nixie.
I'm Cyrus.
Each week, we'll explore the stellar journey of love, identity, and connection, one drama and one dream at a time.
So, gather your stardust, find your spot under the stars, and let's dive in.
This week, we're casting our gaze upon Transmigration, letting the stars guide us through this exciting and vast world it holds.
To start our exploration, we need to understand one thing. What is transmigration, and why does it matter?
I do want to underline that, for one, transmigration is just the concept of someone or a soul, whatever, transporting into something else. A lot of times in our media, it is media for them too. So a lot of times it's a game, it's a book, it's a drama. It's, just them getting pulled into some form of media. Not always necessarily the case, because I think sometimes it is also a parallel world as well, but not as often. There are technically multiple versions of transmigration. I will say, I think we're kind of just going to hit, not necessarily all of them, but a few of the main ones. So this isn't going to hone in on anything like more specifically, say a character enters a book through a pre-existing character, which has its own kind of genre thing. But we'll be doing that, as well as doing where someone transmigrates into something that they don't exist. So like just the talk of transmigration in general.
Yeah, we're using transmigration as like an umbrella term, encompassing all of them.
Which I don't think is the umbrella term. I did look into, and the reason we're bringing up this preference about it is because before starting the episode, I was like, wait a minute, isn't there a difference between entering a universe as a character or being reborn? And then it turns out there are multiple different things. So we're like, that's fun. We'll just talk about them all.
The answer was so much more complicated than we were anticipating. So we're like, no, we're going to talk about all of it.
Because like there's so many ways you can, because all of them are really enjoyable anyways. And so I was like, you know what? I'd rather talk about all of them than just go into one anyways.
Yeah.
And a lot of because then I would have to reevaluate everything, which I probably already am. But for the sake of the episode, I'm way more into just talking about them all than focusing heavily on one or the other. Just one particular one.
But like there's so much, just in general, overall, a lot of fun. And like we'll get into like the nitty gritty of it as we go along. But like this is like one of like my favorite like niches of like a genre. 'Cause I love transmigration stories. I don't know what it is about them. They're a lot of fun for me, which is ironic because I don't think I've actually seen all that too many. But we'll get into that later.
Well, so far
It's
they've been
fine.
your favorite.
They're a good time. Since we now understand the basics, let's break down the constellations of transmigration, mapping out the stars that connect to reveal the deeper layers of meaning we're exploring.
To navigate this constellation, we'll be focusing on how our favorite examples, their appeal, and audience perception impact transmigration.
We start our exploration with our favorite examples, where we'll examine the heart of transmigration and explore how it's essential to understanding them. There's a glaring one.
Hazard Series Satellite.
I say that because I'm looking at the book just on my nightstand. It's staring. It's just staring at me. We're talking about the Spiralum.
Yeah. We're talking about the Kaleidoscope of Death, which is the book it was based on.
The book for that, yeah.
For Spyrum, which actually has two different versions of transmigration involved, depending on if you're talking about the book media or the drama media. Because the drama one involves them falling into a virtual reality game, versus the book is actually
more complicated.
I don't know if it really falls under transmigration in normal senses, because that depends on what you're talking about in transmigration. Because maybe still so, because it's I don't know how it works, because it's
kind of this nebulous third space in between life and death.
It's something like that. So it is something else. So, because I feel like it doesn't count transmigration wise if it's a sit in time kind of thing. 'Cause I feel like, that's more of a time travel's representation,
Mhm.
so it has to be exist in another world kinda state. Kinda like how I wanted to bring up Till the End of the Moon and be like, "That's a good one," but it's not transmigration, that's just a transition between different time periods instead. But it's a really good series, highly recommend. But back to, like, actual transmigration stories.
The one that immediately comes to my mind is Love Game and Eastern Fantasy, simply because it's the one I watched this year,
Most
um,
recently, yeah.
most recently. Very good, very fun.
I don't know why I think of this series often. It has been a good while since I've seen it. I think I saw it when it came out, which was in 2020, so it's been 5 years. But there is but I think about it occasionally, probably because something about it was nostalgic, even though I don't think I remember that much about the series, other than the fact that it was actually the first series I ever saw Ryan Ding or Ding Yushe in, who also was the lead in Love Game
And
and
love
Eastern
yeah.
Fantasy. But the first series I
Oh
had watched,
boy.
which was a transmigration series called The Romance of Tiger and Rose.
I forgot he was the lead in that. I haven't seen it, but I remember Nixie talking about it quite a bit.
It's a
Don't
long
remember
time
that,
ago.
mainly because I didn't know him at that point, but it is what it is.
Now that I think about it, a lot of the shows I've seen this man in have been relatively transmigration.
He has a niche.
I mean, to be fair, that just happens to be the ones I've seen. I know he has ones that definitely aren't transmigration.
Yeah.
Because in this year, or relatively in the past year alone, you've had Loving Major Fantasy, which was transmigration, but then you
Mhm.
have Black and White Forest, which I have not seen, but it was on my list at some point to watch. But that's a crime one. I don't even think that's romance at all. And then his most recent one that I've seen things over that I have been debated on watching but haven't actually watched is Love in Pavilion. But I don't believe that's transmigration last time I checked. I think that's just a straight like Shanxia or Wuxia, whichever one it falls under, because I have never seen it. Ironically, out of the ones I've seen of his, most of them have been transmigration. Though I say that, and I did watch his series Intense Love, which that's a modern one. And that's definitely not transmigration. That's a completely different style. I do remember, and I don't know if that was because that just happened to be the obsession I had. I do remember there was a good while that back in like I want to say around the same time of as the romance between Tiger and Rose, or Rose and Tiger, whichever direction I just said it was, came out. I want to say there was a lot of series that dropped. I think China was going through a hard phase of transmigrations. Though to be fair, I feel like China is the main provider of transmigrations. It's just a very
Oh,
popular niche.
absolutely.
It's just a very like it happens in every country, but like for some reason I find so many from China, and I love that for them
Honestly, I do too.
because there's so many. Because it's been a while, so I could be wrong, and I don't think I finished the series. And I think one because it was super long, and two, I get distracted super easily, so it just happens. There's a series called Cinderella Chef, and I'm almost 100% positive that also was transmigration to a certain extent. If I remember, I think the female lead fell into the story. I don't know. I've seen too much. It's been 5+ years, so maybe it wasn't transmigration, but I could have sworn it was, and I think they came out around the same time as the other one.
I don't know if this was released around the same time, but the one that I always remember that's Transmigration that you have seen that I started but didn't finish, I think it was called Unique Lady?
Yeah, or Lavish Lady. I think there's multiple versions of its name. Yeah, I think it also had a season 2 that I didn't get to watch, but yeah, because that one stars Gong Joon, who was one of the main leads in Word of Honor as
Oh,
Wen
yeah.
Kexing.
Mhm, when Keshing. Yeah, I do remember that now.
That was also the first series I had
Yep,
ever
yep, yep.
seen that man in a series. Was
Yep, yep, yep.
ironically Unique Lady. Um, Actually, either it was Unique Lady or it was Flavor It's Yours, which you have seen, which I
I
knew
have seen Flavor Is Yours.
I
Mhm.
knew it as a completely different title though. Prior, I knew
Yeah.
about its longer title, but he was also those were the first two dramas I had ever seen this man in.
Side thing, when I came across, because like, I watched that while I was still in high school, so, like, it's been 5 plus years at this point. I think it was 5 years ago, 'cause I think it was my junior year,
Mhm.
but I was working on doing Nixie's, spreadsheet of all of her dramas that I'm making for her, and I came across Flavor It's Yours on her, my drama list, and I was, like, filling out, and I was like, "Gongjun, was Wen Keqing the lead of this series and I didn't know it yet because I didn't know Art of Honor even existed at that point?" And the answer is yes. So that was a fun experience for me. Wild times out here.
Very wild.
Like, you've definitely seen more. Like, you're currently watching one, aren't you? The Thai one?
Ah! How did I forget about that one? I'm literally watching it right now. I forgot about that because one of the ones I'm currently watching right now is Transmigration. And this one I started purely off the fact that it was just wild to me of a transmigration. And like I started this series be purely off the fact that it was just a weird concept of transmigration and I was here for it. Cause like it's called Tales of the Grandmaster and it's a Thai series that talk essentially one of the male leads of a Chinese novel ending up in real world where these two girls who read about the novel. It's crazy concept. But I think I started it because like I've seen so many like BLs occasionally, particularly more so than any of the others, make
Yeah.
comments or allure to the idea that they occasionally make some Chinese style stuff in Thailand, but I've never seen it beyond like maybe like a hinted performance kind of thing. Because I've seen
Yeah.
some where it's like maybe it's rooted in like maybe they have interest in Chinese dramas, but it's not heavily like in the actual Chinese culture itself. This
Mhm.
one is because they have to situate themselves in a almost wuxia setting for the Chinese novel thing, which only remind me of, for example, of like in the one of the series we're currently watching as one of our airing ones is like Top Form, where like they're shooting a movie
Mhm.
that is Chinese also as well, in in Thailand, and where they have to dress fully in proper period pieces and stuff like that, or
Yes.
fantasy period pieces, and
Mhm.
that was something that just blew my mind when I discovered there was a series that also actually took on that in an actual series and not just like a little piece where like they're trying to shoot one,
Yeah.
because I had never run across that prior. And so when I came across Tale of the Grandmaster, I was like, okay, cool. But it's also, you're right, it is transmigration. It is a little different because it isn't a fully set one in that one. Because like I said, we end up a lot more in modern because it's the male lead transfer. There's technically two couples, but the main one is focused on a character named Yitian. So yes, we have Chinese names, which I will want to note this. One of my favorite things I'm obsessed with is when things get explained properly. And because this novel was supposed to be Chinese, as in like the author was also ideally supposed to be Chinese, um,
You would hope, yeah.
I loved that apparently when he ends up coming out of the novel and the girls that find him, which is Lin and Rin, end up finding him. And Rin's a doctor, by the way. Lin is just a very rich, like she end up literally it opens up to her getting her inheritance from her father and whatnot, through his will, yada yada. And they end up running into him because she had fallen off a cliff while rock climbing, and after she falls and she ends up somehow landing safely, she ends up running into Yitian, and they end up rushing him to the hospital. Both of them, technically, she ends up getting pretty much relatively unscathed. He's kind of mostly scathed. But then Rin ends up, as she's the doctor, ends up like expecting Yitian and finds out that he has the same tattoos and stuff like that. And it's also very faded, so there's no way it would be like very new and whatnot. And there's other elements about him. He kept saying, I'm Wang Yitian, and like giving his full name title. And she's like, which is ironic because you would think the doctor out of the two would be the more logical one, because she ends up turning around, going to Lin, and is like, oh my God, do you think he actually might be that character? And she's like, you're mad. And Lynn's just like, you're mad. There's no way he's Yitian. For starters, he speaks Thai, which was a great point. A great point for a
Honestly,
character.
yeah.
For a character that's supposed to be Chinese, that was an excellent thing to point out. So what I loved is that they end up confronting Yitian, who's still inpatient uniform in the bed, you know, still injured. And they confront him, and he keeps being so adamant that he was Yitian and stuff like that. And I don't remember what was said per se, but I think they say something in English, and he responds back in English, and they get thrown off. And this is where, like, Rin, who's so intelligent, starts going, wait a minute, pulls out a Google Translate, and then I think she goes through, like, English, she goes through Spanish, she goes through Chinese, she goes through multiple different languages, and she pulls Lin to the side. She said, I think he can fluently understand these languages because the novel's been translated into those languages. So that was a really cool concept to be
Yeah,
like,
I
that's
love
the
that.
explanation. That's how he can speak Thai.
Love that.
Exactly. There was logic behind
Obsessed.
that. And I was obsessed. But it's also transmigration again because he gets pulled into it. But also for another reason, because Rin, the doctor character, her pairing is the friend to Yitian named Chisen. And he's still back in the original novel, back in, in their setting. And it turns out he has the ability to, like, I forgot what they called it, but he's able to take his mind and put it into the other world to try to find Yitian. But for some reason, the only person he can contact in their world is Rin. And there is points where Rin does get to do the same thing that Chisen can do, and instead she can also go into his world. So there's kind of a vice versa here on Transmigration to a certain
cool.
say. I have not seen them enter their world. I want to predict that they will end up going to the martial world. I think that's what they call it. Ideally, the novel world, you know?
Yeah.
I will say there's an allure to the idea that this novel world is a real world, and it's just the author can see into that world kind of situation, which is pretty interesting. So there's that too.
Interesting.
But I'm still confused because if that's the case, we kind of lose a little bit of the logic behind the languages a little bit, unless somehow the translation somehow plays into it. I don't know.
Who knows?
But yeah, who knows? That's also, like I said, that is a transmigration story. And I'm glad you brought that up. That's kind of funny. I forgot. But you know what another one is that I also recently watched? And we brought it up in a previous one, to be honest, a previous episode. But the Switch On was also Transmigration.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a W remake. And W is definitely Transmigration. Yep. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
So while we were struggling to remember things, ironically, I have seen a lot of new ones, or recently have seen a lot of Transmigration. Wild. With that being said, we shift orbits, and we find ourselves at their appeal. This new path takes us deeper into Transmigration, uncovering hidden connections and unfolding new layers. As I've said before, outside of the podcast, this Transmigration is escapism at its best.
And truly, point blank period. Like,
think about
it. It's escapisms for the character.
That's what I was fixing to say.
Just like taken out of their world completely, which the dream, honestly, at this point.
That's just what I was fixing to say. It's not just escapism for the watcher. It's the escapism for the character.
But like they're always trying to like get back to their world for some reason. Like, no, just live in your little cute little fantasy where you don't have to deal with the responsibilities of the real world.
Who cares if you're
like,
fixing
you have,
to get killed multiple times?
Sometimes you have a system that'll save you.
Sometimes you don't.
Sometimes you don't.
Most
Sometimes
of the time
you have a system that's actively trying to kill you.
Oh, self-saving system. That was one.
Oh, absolutely.
Because like you said, sometimes you have a system. And at first I was thinking about the system that was used in the Eastern, Eastern Fantasy.
Love
and then I was like, oh yeah, you know who else had an attitude with the game system?
I honestly, my favorite thing, a common trope of like Transmigration stories that have systems is that systems are always sassy, and it's the best.
Yes.
It's my favorite thing.
I love it when they have attitudes.
Oh yeah. Like I love like when the system has its own attitude. I love when the transmigrated individual has an attitude back.
Mm-hmm.
Xin Cho, Xin Yao, my I love him.
I love that in Love Game and Eastern Fantasy. That before the what was it? What they call it? I don't remember. But like the safety nets per se were taken off. The train
The
was taken off.
tutorial.
The tutorial mode was taken off. The game system just let her die multiple times, and it would come
Yeah.
into play at the most hilarious moments. Like the moment she did get out of tutorial was hilarious timing, because she was like, she died multiple times before, and she was like, I'll just come back, whatever.
At
And
the
then
hands of Muyang, mostly.
yes, and then she was like, oh, you know what? I need to come clean about something. I need to tell him. And as soon as she was going to say it, the system's like, oh, by the way, tutorial is over. If you die for real. And
You're
she was
dead.
like, change of topics. Let's do something else.
Actually, I have nothing to talk to you about. I know I said that we needed to talk. No, we don't. I don't want to die.
Or talk about the point system in that series, where like it makes you think that she would think she ended up with a higher point than she did, and then they're like, oh, by the way, there's
Oh,
like a
yeah.
little point in between these numbers, so it's like it's 2.8.
Yeah.
He likes you that much more. Or she would see it and she'd be like, oh my god, 40%, that's awesome, and then there's like a negative.
Oh, it's so great. I love that.
It's so dumb, but it's so good.
It's so much fun.
You know what system has the biggest attitude? The biggest sass? That depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about sass, the biggest system for that, Renunsa. He is technically the
Honestly,
system.
Yeah. Now that you say it, now that you speak that into existence, yeah. Nanza as a system is A, so biased, B, so biased.
Just biased.
C, the sassiest individual in that entire story.
For real.
Whoever coded him to be that way, genius. Talking specifically about the drama canon.
But speaking of his system, not so much in sass, but the door gods in that story, kind of creepy.
Yeah.
They were
Mhm.
pretty enforceful.
Yeah.
I think the only time they had, not necessarily sass, but they had personality given to them was like in one around the end of the episode where they end up uniting to help Linjisha and Renansa. So
Honestly, I love that. That was a very fun episode.
it was. Yo, Nanza tops the cake for that.
Yeah. I've never thought about him in like the lens of he is a system, he is the system of that show. But you are correct. And that shifts things.
He may not have been able to control anything per se, because I don't know what would have happened to him if he had actually died in the game, because he isn't in P, so he probably could have just come back. Because the death scene that he ended up quote unquote having wasn't a death scene because he was an NPC, even though I originally thought that was the case, but it was because the bracelet he had saved him.
Mhm.
And so we've never seen him die in a normal NPC manner where he could
I
probably
agree
regenerate.
though. I think he would just come back.
Probably. So I mean, he was the boss level, technically.
I was like, yeah. The game doesn't exist without him. So
And like his
he'd
whole
be back.
existence was to go along with Ling Jishu so that him and Ling Jishu could make it to the end.
Yep.
Which is wild because spoiler, I'm so sorry. I just realized we're not in the series Satellite here, and we should have talked about this in the series Satellite, but we
should've.
didn't. We didn't, and it didn't come to mind until now because we do them backwards. We do series Satellite first. But skip this. I don't know. Just hit skip until you hear me stop talking about it. Something that is curious, speaking of the ending in terms of, because like this is a major spoiler, so like I said, major spoiler, so skip it if you've never seen the Spiral. If you have, this is a great topic to talk about, is the fact that even though he wasn't NPC, his goal was to make it to the go along with Ling Jishu to make it to the end. But the crazy thing about that concept is that either is the 11th door, because in order to make it to the 12th door, which was not even existent, It did not
Yeah.
exist because Nanza had to be there to fix the game and wipe it and make it clean, essentially, again. But the concept of the 11th door meant that Linchisha probably would have had to give up his life. It's either give up
Yeah.
Linchisha's life so that the game saves multiple people, or to save Nanza. Actually, no, either or Nanza gives up it and he makes it to the end of the game, and just make it to the end of the game because there was nothing after that, which is a wild concept to give your friend.
Yeah.
And two, even though it's not the exact same concept of it's either choose one person over multiple people or multiple people over one person, it still carries that same
Mhm.
concept per se, because technically that specific concept was used in Snow Village when we refer to
Yes.
the original door god in that one, because that's what the concept was. And he had been in the opposite side because that was a really cool parallel between the door god and his own life.
Yes. Uh-huh.
But so was the ending of the drama. If it hadn't been the fact that they ran into the other players in which she gave her life up for going through the door that would end her, they wouldn't have made it through the door of life to get to the actual 12th door.
Yeah.
So it's kind of insane when you think of that. When you think of the depth
Yeah.
of that and the system on its own.
Wild.
Yeah. But back to the transmigration thing. That story is insane because, like we said, the transmigration factor into the spiral was more so of the going into, like, almost like you said. Well, how'd you word it?
It's like a third space, like a third like nebulous kind of space in between life and death.
So I don't know how well that plays into necessarily transmigration, but we counted it as it to a certain degree, but also not. It's a weird
You
concept.
know, the the book is questionable. I don't know what else you would like categorize it as if
Other
you
than
don't
sci-fi.
categorize it as that's yeah. But like the drama is definitely because that is a game. So
Mm-hmm.
the drama's safe. Like that's fine.
Book's questionable because the book's the life and death third concept. The series itself is a virtual reality game.
Yeah.
And in this case, it is one where they transmigrate into non-existent characters because they're just players.
Because they're just yeah.
They don't play in either the main character or in a role play kind of game. If that makes sense. It's not a role play. It's a get out or die. Like, it's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, essentially. Literally, actually.
Good series. Fabulous series, even.
Very good. Like I know like the series Satellite comes out after this, but the runtime on that episode, just look like when it comes out, look at it. We've got a lot to say. It's a good series. Highly recommend.
But yeah, back to what we were saying. We kind of derailed a lot. We always derail. But the appeal of it is definitely that ability to, like, honestly, like any drama is to escape. But we're faced with the concept of, like, true escapism, you
Mhm.
know?
Escapism, Inception.
Yes.
Escapist. I was trying to like merge them together. I didn't quite get there. Escapeception. Escape session. Whatever. It's fine.
What are the two words you're trying to merge?
Escapism and Inception.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Inscape I can say it in my head. My it's just not it's not wording correctly. Never mind.
I don't know.
Ignore me, please. Finally, our third focus is audience perception. This is where we highlight its significance in understanding the deeper layers of transmigration. I do think these kind of shows are extremely popular just because audiences find them a lot of fun just to watch. And I think they're a lot of times very compelling because like you get to see a character who has just like a mundane life, much like most watchers, get pulled into this whole new world and like living vicariously through that in your dramas. Very fun.
There's nothing like seeing a character end up in a new world and not know what in the world they're doing.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then just get into a world of shenanigans because
Shenanigans. Yeah.
they don't know what they're doing. And like, and to be honest, I don't know which one I like better, but I like both. And that is the concept of either them entering as a nobody and then going through and just not knowing what in the world they're doing and just confusing everyone, or falling into an existing character and ever being like,
Being
what the
the
fuck
complete
happened to
opposite
you?
personality. Yeah.
And be like, why are you nice all of a sudden? This is
Yeah, you
weird.
were a bitch before, like, and now you're nice? Like, is this a trap? Am I being entrapped right now?
Are you fixing to shove me downstairs? Like, what's happening? That reminds me of, like, I think the most popular transmigration among Chinese ones, specifically, for example, again, was like the romance between, the romance, the romance of Tiger and Rose, I think is what it was. I already read the title. Um, which and this isn't the first one that does it, but the most common one I see is that of either, instead of falling into a heroine's perspective, we
Mhm.
often fall into villains.
Yes.
Self-saving system does that as
Yeah.
well. And I know there's more, but I'm forgetting top of my head right now. And then there's ones where if it's not the villain, then it's a random supporting character
Mhm.
that ends up making a point. Because, like, oh, Love Game Easter Fantasy. That was another villain-ish one. She
Yep.
wasn't a main one, but she was a sub one. So if it's not the villain, it's some random. It's almost essentially becoming, entering a world being nobody, but usually it's a supporting one, so they have at least a little bit of a backing in existence in the world,
Yeah.
and that's kind of funny. But there's nothing like watching those characters struggle, and that can be either them trying to struggle to fathom like the new existence they're currently living in and trying to get out, or being
Or
pretty
simply not
intelligent
trying to
about it.
die as their characters because they know that, like, I'm I'm gonna die in a very an awful way because
Oftentimes,
in the
that's the villain.
media. Yeah, I'm talking scum villain.
I thought you were talking about the game Easter Fantasy as well, because that one she also had a
That
rough
is also
ending.
true, yeah. That was rough, yeah.
Because almost in the same sense, the other one, she ends up in a bad situation because she has a crush on the main heroine, and she does a lot of things to his sister, so therefore that causes her to get in trouble, and she ends up in some rough states. The original one, not her, of course.
We all love Meow Meow.
I love when her personality started changing, and dude was like, "What is up? What is up?"
Yeah.
You're acting. It was hilarious because she somehow ended up by acting differently in the negatives at first.
Yeah.
Like somehow being different made him go, "Oh, my guard was already up, but now it's
But now
10
you're
feet
acting
higher."
weird.
It's like, we're gonna build up an even higher guard, and it was hilarious. And it took until her actively keep being very nice for him to be like, maybe you're not the same person I thought you were.
So cute.
Like I said, there's nothing like watching that in a series. Yeah, gotta love trauma on characters, but not in the normal sense. I like, new trauma, new world trauma.
Fictional trauma.
Fictional trauma. Always
Fantasy world
fictional.
trauma.
Always fictional. We don't like trauma in real life, but we love it in our stuff. We've broken everything down. Now it's time to put it all together. In this segment, we'll share our thoughts on Transmigration as a full constellation and reflect on its total impact.
I really should watch more of these shows. I enjoy them a lot, but
You should. I got some suggestions.
I know you do. You always do.
I always got suggestions. But yeah, I feel like I've said previously, it's just escapism at its best, and you sometimes just gotta enjoy a character who doesn't know what in the world they're doing in this new world.
Absolutely.
At least that's my favorite thing. I think that's most people's favorite thing,
I
though.
agree. Yeah. It's very enjoyable.
It really takes the concept of oftentimes the exciting incident and stories that follow at the, they don't wrap it up because usually there's a few more segments or scenes leading up to act 2. Oftentimes is what they refer to as the character enters a new world,
Mhm.
and this really just tops the tier of taking that literally.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, in the storyline, that Act 2 takes place after they've existed in the new world a little bit longer, because usually the exciting incident is them getting into the new world, trying to solve it,
Mhm.
not being able to go back, opening up Act 2.
Yeah.
But even so, still kind of applies to that idea of they can't go back to the way they used to live. But it's always fun. Love the impact they have on
Mhm.
storytelling and in a different concept of bringing in another world and just seeing how a character survives.
Absolutely agree.
And just like that, the constellation is fully drawn. We thank you for joining us for this episode of Stars Aligned Dramas and Dreams podcast, where we meet amongst the stars that illuminate the love stories that light up our universe and connect us all.
If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and share your stardust and thoughts with us. We'd love to hear your comments, favorite moments, or suggestions for what we should explore next.
You can connect with us in the comments or through our socials, as well as our email that are linked in the description. Let's keep the conversation going under the stars.
Until next time, keep dreaming, keep listening, and remember, love always shines brightest in the cosmos. Bye.